Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have had an intense 10 days of activity from the sun, primarily due to sunspot group 4366. It blasted off that 8.1 X-class flare, 5 other X-class flares. We did have a solar storm impact that triggered a G1 geomagnetic storm. And in fact, here in Abisko, Sweden, where I'm reporting from, last night we saw an amazing substorm and the aurora burst upon us. It was incredible. More on that story later in the video. Well, this sunspot group 4366 has started to fracture apart, though, as we see here with this 171 angstrom imagery. It is still very, very active. We have a very large core now as the leader. Sometimes what we see is that these very large sunspot cores, they will stay quiet as they rotate across and then suddenly just have a huge explosion. That is certainly possible. And as a result of that core being so large, I think we're very likely to see it when it comes back around on Earth facing in probably about 18 days or so, because it takes 2 weeks to go across the far side. It's not quite there yet. So we'll have to wait and see whether we get more activity from that sunspot group 4366 then. We also have in the trailing region quite a lot of new development, flux, compact and dense, not nearly the size as 4366 reached at its maximum when it was really twisted and tangled and very compact. But in general, we're still seeing a lot of activity from it. We have quite a lot of other sunspots on the Earth facing side of the sun right now, transiting through the strike zone. So it's very possible that one of them gives us a show. But as of right now, they've been fairly quiet. Our X-ray flux in general is back to the C-class flare range. We do have some new impacts coming in on the 7th to the 8th, according to NOAA. These are solar storm impacts. We're likely to see some elevated geomagnetic activity as a result of that, probably active conditions to G1 conditions. But following behind, we see these new sunspot groups. And well, yesterday, there was a big explosion on the far side of the sun. And so that's signaling that there is a very active sunspot group, or at least a sunspot group capable of producing pretty gnarly coronal mass ejections soon to rotate into view. And that was the exact same setup that we had earlier in January. Before we had that G4 storm, we saw 2 coronal mass ejections on the far side. Then that sunspot group rotated Earth facing. Then it gave us a wall up. So we could have a repeat of that. In general, it seems we're seeing more solar activity now in February than we have had in recent months. For example, January, December, though that storm that we had in January at G4 levels, reaching G5 minus at one point, and it being a near Carrington event, if it had a negative magnetic field configuration, was quite intense. We got very lucky there. So a lot to cover in today's video and much more. Let's jump right into it. Let's start with this chronograph imagery from yesterday showing this explosion on the far side. We're looking at our C3 chronograph. This white circle there denotes the sun. They put an occluding disk over it to block the majority of the light from the sun, so we can see these fainter but still bright outflows of solar wind and also solar storms. This is Mars right there. This is Venus. They performed their conjunction with the sun back on January 8th or so, and things have been active ever since we had that planetary alignment. You notice that this is going off here to the eastern limb of the sun solar coordinate system, meaning that this is more on the eastern side, so it's going to rotate into view soon. If it blasted off this direction, we'd be looking at a longer rotation period until it reached us. So this is very likely to appear on the limb of the sun in view in probably just a few days, if that. And if it continues to be active, we could see new solar storms launched our way. There's some discussion as to whether this was a filament that lifted off. It kind of has that shape and look to it just from that. But if you look here at this imagery, it looks more like a shock wave. And so this seems to have been a solar flare that then launched this coronal mass ejection. Though in general, the jury is out. We just know that there is some activity. Though if it was a filament, it could have just been, a filament one-off, that's it. If it is a solar flare, then that requires a sunspot to have launched it. And this indicates more likely a sunspot having launched something off. So that is what we are seeing from the far side. No significant activity today from that sunspot group or in general from Earth facing. So let's give 4366 a fresh look. So here we have sunspot group 4366. In fact, the entire Earth-facing side of the sun going back to the 1st of February. And we see it reached this monstrous phase here right when it was Earth-facing, and it has now started to break apart. This is the leader sunspot, a very big core, a lot of powerful magnetic strength there. And we see that we started to get a little bit of flux filling in these intermediate regions just recently with the trailing part. So that sunspot now, I think you can probably consider these different sunspots at this point, is looking like it's kind of re-emerging into a second new large sunspot, though it is rotating now off the Earth-facing side of the sun. So overall, this trailer there is not as big as this sunspot was at its maximum and its most dense, complex, twisted, but it's still a significant sunspot on the sun right now, maybe the most significant if you exclude this leader, which is basically just one single polarity sunspot core. So when you have the mixing and you have the twisted magnetic fields and you have a lot of density and compaction, that is when you generally get a lot of solar flares. We had dozens of M-class flares, 6 X-class flares. It's been a wild, wild rodeo, and all that charges up the Earth in its global electric circuit. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to describe the global electric circuit in a video to soon be released, probably the next video. Subscribe to be educated on that, because when we're talking about space weather effects on Earth, we can't just look at the solar flare strength and the solar storm. We have to look at the conditions of the Earth before, let's say, that solar storm arrived. And well, when you have all this sort of activity with solar flares charging up the ionosphere, even a small impact can create effectively large results. And well, that's what we saw. We had that 8.1 X-class flare, coronal mass ejection launched from that. It arrived to Earth unusually fast, though it came in with a slow velocity. So that's a little odd. Regardless, the geomagnetic activity here in Abisko, Sweden, way up north, was not that spectacular. The moment of impact, when we had the solar wind at 20 nanotesla and it was mostly northward field, but afterwards it was incredible. This is the view last night. We had this amazing substorm open up right after my group with Snow Camp. We did a whole bunch of cold plunges in the ice in the lake, and then we used the sauna. We were hanging out, we walked outside, the sun went down, and we were treated to this incredible show. Now, this is not what I saw with my eyes. I have applied a bit of color enhancement here, but this was filmed simply just on my iPhone 15 Pro Max to let you know exactly. And we were seeing this with our eyes. There was green and everything, but I brought the colors out for you. But effectively, the entire sky was covered with aurora. And then later that night, maybe about 6 hours later, around midnight local time, we also had green and red aurora. So we had both the altitude bands where you can get oxygen to get ionized and excited. We had that active, whereas we really only had green aurora with the first burst substorm last night. And that was after the main phase of the solar storm impact that came in on the 5th of February. Around the 4th, 5th of February. So we do have some new impacts coming in according to NOAA. Let us check this out. This is their solar wind model for right now. And we see a double peak structure here. So this is the 6th right here. We could have something coming in, though now it's the 7th. So that didn't really materialize. But we see this double wave right here. Not as significant. The velocity is not really all that crazy, but this could increase geomagnetic volatility for the next few days if you are in a location like I am, where you can get aurora even from subtle solar wind conditions, so long the Earth is preconditioned and you also have already heightened geomagnetic volatility. Like we were in the later phase of it and it was a substorm, then we could get some more fantastic viewing shows. And then we could also, of course, get new solar storms to launch off that impact us. And just going back quickly to our growth model here of sunspot group 4366, I just want to clarify. I talked about the risk of a modern Carrington event a lot over the past 10 days because this sunspot group was so active and it had all the requisites to be a Carrington-class solar flare and coronal mass ejection producer. Some people have been commenting saying like, dude, the Carrington event didn't happen, what's the deal? If you watch the video, you would know that I said the forecast was just that we had a much higher risk. Normally the risk is 0 because we don't have the sunspot, let's say. Then sometimes we have sunspots, which, you know, they're not that big, but there's always a slight risk factor that they do something extraordinary. When you have this sort of activity, you know, I was saying the risk factor was maybe 10%, 20%, and that's actually hard to gauge what the risk factor is, the potential of that occurring, because we see these sort of Carrington events so infrequently. 1859, 1872, 1921, 2012, though it missed us. So they're really not that common. But there was never a guarantee of that to happen, and there's not a guarantee of that to happen immediately in the future. At some point it will. You know, the probability of a Carrington event, I think, is probably more than like 5% a century. I think it's a bit more common than that. It seems to have about a 50-year reoccurrence interval. So we could have one soon, we could have one in 50 years. But regardless, that is a real risk factor that could cause a lot of technological problems and more. Of course, there's biophysical effects. So it's worth, you know, giving an accurate forecast for that when that potential exists and not just burying our heads in the sand. So I just wanted to address that. This sunspot right here really was something special. As you can see, you see the twisting, the torque here, the sheer size right at Earth facing. It was ready to go, and we really got lucky with the fact that this sunspot was so impulsive with its flares, meaning it didn't really release any coronal mass ejections, and that it didn't do something bigger. So fingers crossed that that continues, because we don't want something that really like sets us back. But also fingers crossed that up here, for those that can see the aurora, that we get some good shows. So that right middle ground is what we're hoping for. And here we see our X-ray flux for the past 7 days. We see this 8.1 X-class flare, a whole bunch of other M-class flares and X-class flares. We have gone through this. Just because now this is over does not mean the energetic effects are effectively done. There's also this, you could say, integration period, not only for the Earth energy system, but also for us, because while things have cooled off now, it takes time for these energies to work through the different systems. So keep that in mind. But we are now in a period of lesser solar flare activity. Our X-ray flux is back down to the C-class range, and near the bottom of it, where we were hovering up in M-class territory for long durations of time. So that is good to have this cool off, though it means that if you're hoping for some sort of big flare, that is looking less likely now, especially because we've had this separation of 4366, though anything is possible. And again, it looks like we have a fairly significant sunspot soon to rotate to the Earth-facing side of the sun in a few days. And there's also some filaments on the sun as well. We can check that out back with our 171 angstrom view. There's nothing too spectacular at this moment in time from what I'm seeing, but we do have some filaments scattered across the sun. And in general, when we have this sort of explosive activity on the sun, it makes those a little bit more unstable, because all these magnetic fields are connected together. And when you get some explosion here, that flux can kind of radiate out and maybe cause enough of a destabilization for a filament to blast off. So just in general, if you zoom out and really step back, we're looking at a period of enhanced volatility and activity from the sun right now, meaning more things are possible to occur. What they are going to be specifically is the nuance in the art and science of space weather forecasting. But in general, if you're looking at this from okay, well, is the sun doing stuff or is it not doing things? It's doing a lot right now. That energy is hitting the Earth. It's being integrated into the Earth energy system. It's being integrated into you. It's also being integrated into us at a societal and collective level. So we could be looking at eruptions of energy at the societal collective level. Maybe with yourself, you have some, epiphany moment, or, just be mindful of your emotions, your energy, and like how you interact with others. We could see some new expression of energy emerge from the Earth itself with volcanic activity or earthquake activity or severe weather or just changing weather patterns. So keep all this in mind as you learn about this stuff more and more. You start to find out how it's more interconnected than modern science gives due. and also probably what I give due. I think there's probably more holistic interconnections here than anyone realizes, and that we'll be discovering that in the years and decades going forward. So that is your update for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow, and subscribe to stay up to date on everything that's happening with the Earth energetically. Earthquakes, volcanoes, severe weather, geomagnetic storms like this, but also solar activity, space weather, planetary alignments, planetary resonances. We have an eclipse coming up on February 17th, and then we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction following up right behind on the 20th. We have a planetary parade coming up shortly after that at the end of February. So there is a lot happening right now as it relates to our planets. And of course, we also look at interstellar and cosmic forces. All these things combined together. You'll learn about all of them if you follow along on the channel. I also release updates on X. This is at Stefan Burns Geo. Links to all the data, my socials, whatever research is all in the video description. That is what I do every single video. And wishing all of you well. I will continue to report here from Abisko, Sweden. I'm going to share my story about the aurora and what happened yesterday with this cold plunge and everything in a separate video. It is really quite magical, metaphysical, and more. It's super cool. Excited to share that with you all. So stay up to date. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Have a great day. Thank you so much. I'll see you all in the next video.